Gosh, you know, I get asked that question all the time. Um, I can't ever remember a time in my life when I didn't hear voices. Uh, they've always been there. But there was never messages. I wasn't being asked to tell anybody anything. I wasn't being asked to do anything on behalf of those on the other side. Quite honestly, I didn't know they were dead people. I just heard these voices when I was alone, when I was out walking. I was an avid runner in my youth, and I would go for a jog, and I would have these conversations with people that only I could hear, or whom I thought only I could hear. Quite honestly, I was in grade 8 before I found out that I was the only one who could hear them. I just assumed, as most children would, that whichever way I am is the way everybody else is, because there's no frame of reference. And it wasn't until I was in grade 8 when I mentioned to a classmate one day about, you know, when the voices talk to you, and she said, voices? And I said, yeah, the people who talk to you that you can't see, the ones that talk to you when you're by yourself. And you should have seen her reaction, because her reaction and the look on her face made my blood run cold. Because I thought, oh my God, not everybody hears them? And she basically said to me, you know, Linda, only nuts hear voices. And I thought, oh, not everybody hears them. And I mean, I never mentioned it to my family. Like I say, however you are is how you presume everybody else is until you have something to measure it by. And there wasn't anything worthy to tell. There was no reason to mention it. And so I didn't. So I was actually almost 39 years old when my family found out that I heard voices. And some of them have had a hard time dealing with it because, you know, my parents raised me, my siblings lived with me, and yet no one in my house knew that I heard voices. And here I am coming out of the closet at almost 39 years old saying, hey, guess what, guys? I have an ability to hear dead people. And I really wouldn't have known were it not for the fact that I was taking my dad to a psychic fair. And at the time he had an oxygen tank and a walker, and he had trouble making his way up and down stairs or in large spaces without having to bring all the gear. So on the way home from work one day, well, I thought I'll stop by and I'll collect some flyers so he can decide who he wants to have a reading with. And I will make sure that the room is suitable for him, and so we don't have to bring all the gear, because he hated having to drag it all around. So when I stopped in, I'm walking around, and there were probably about a dozen or so readers there that day, and they would all introduce themselves and tell me what their specialty was, what their weekend specials were, and that kind of thing. And when I got to this one table, I said to this lady, her name is Geraldine, and I said, so what's your gimmick? And she said, I don't have one. And I go, oh, sure you do. All you people have a shtick. What's yours? Face reading, palm reading, tarot cards, numerology, you know. What's your gimmick? And she said, I don't use any tools. I simply hold your hands, I tune into the energy, and I tell you what I see, hear, and feel. And I thought, cool trick that is. What could you possibly tell me about me just by holding my hands? And there was something about the simplicity of the way she worked that really intrigued me. And I continued around the room, picked up the flyers, went out, got in my car, was ready to leave. But again, something about the simplicity of this really sort of suckered me in. And I checked my purse to see if I had enough money for a half-an-hour session. It was $50 for a half-an-hour session, and by far, honest to God, it is the best $50 I've ever spent. There was nothing mind-blowing or earth-shattering, but she was accurate with every statement she made about my husband, my kids, their birth order, their personalities, my husband's work ethic, things that were going on in my current life, things that had happened to me, were all accurate. And it wasn't till towards the end of the session when she said, you know, you have two gifts that frighten the life out of you, and it's time you started using them. And I just kind of held my breath, waiting to see what was coming next. And she said, you hear voices and you sense energy. And I looked at her and I went, you mean I'm not a schizophrenic? And she said, no, did you think you were? And I went, hell yeah, I have 6 sisters and I'm the only one who claims to hear voices. And she said, no, you're just a medium. You just have an ability to hear dead people. And I thought, oh, great, this is something I can work with. And it was actually a relief, because for 14 years of being married to my husband, he wasn't even aware that I heard voices. It wasn't something I talked about, because in my mind that was a recipe for divorce and I wasn't willing to go there. So I concealed it even from him. So to say that, you know, I have known that I'm a medium for the past going on 7 years now, but I've always heard voices.